Hey guys, John V here from PhoneArena. Right now you're watching our in-depth video comparison between the Nokia Lumia 1020 and of course the Samsung Galaxy S4. We have two flagship devices here, respective platforms, Android versus Windows Phone. A lot to like about both. The 41 megapixel camera on the Lumia 1020, and as we know with the Galaxy S4, it has a host of hardware under the hood to really make it a compelling offering. So we're going to pit these two against one another to see how they stack up. Visually, these two handsets don't really depart from the distinguishable design characteristics of their respective lines. The Lumia 1020 looks just like any Lumia before it, and of course the Galaxy S4 looks much like its predecessors. But between the two, in terms of the in-the-hand feel, we gotta give it to the Samsung Galaxy S4. They're both still very large in size, so if you have smaller hands, might be some issue holding them. But just because the Galaxy S4 is lighter and doesn't have that hump in the rear where the camera is on the Lumia 1020, it just feels more natural when you're holding it. But as far as construction, we'll give it to the Lumia 1020 just because of its unibody construction and its sturdier polycarbonate matte finish. It does look and feel like a more sturdy handset versus the plastic offering with the Galaxy S4. So these two handsets utilize AMOLED technology. On the Lumia 1020, it's a 4.5-inch PureMotion HD Plus display with clear black AMOLED. So its resolution stands at 1280 by 768 pixels. In contrast, the Samsung Galaxy S4 utilizes a larger 5-inch Super AMOLED HD display, and its resolution is higher at 1920 by 1080 pixels. Doing the math, there's a significant difference in terms of the pixel density number, and we notice that the Galaxy S4 just has the sharper looking details, especially here in the web browser. From a zoomed out view, we could notice that there's a lot more clarity with the Galaxy S4. At the same time, seeing that they're both AMOLED based panels, they have the same qualities we love about the technology in general. For example, you have that rich color reproduction on the oversaturated side. You have also some great wide viewing angles, but we'd have to give it to the Galaxy S4 just because of the higher resolution, and on top of that, it just has that wow factor. And in addition, you have the air view functionality too, where you hover your finger over certain elements and the display is able to track that. It's all capacitive buttons on the Lumia 1020. There are 3 of them. They're spaced far away from one another to reduce any accidental presses. In contrast, the Galaxy S4 has that physical home button, which are surrounded by its capacitive menu and back keys. Meanwhile, above the displays, we have their earpieces, their light and proximity sensors, and front-facing cameras. It's a 1.2 megapixel one on the Lumia 1020, a higher 2 megapixel count one in the Galaxy S4. When it comes to their power buttons and volume controls, we really can't complain just because they're distinct and also responsive, but we do appreciate the dedicated shutter key that's on the Lumia 1020. Even though they feature micro USB ports for charging and data connectivity, it's only the Samsung Galaxy S4 that you gain video out with the aid of an MHL adapter. One thing worth mentioning about the Samsung Galaxy S4 is that it also features an IR blaster, which enables it to turn into a universal remote, which is definitely useful. By today's smartphone standards, the 13 megapixel autofocus camera in the Samsung Galaxy S4 is widely regarded as being a beefy thing. It also features an LED flash and 1080p video recording naturally, but it still pales in comparison to the even beefier 41 megapixel PureView camera with the Lumia 1020, and it has a host of cool camera tech. For example, it has an f2.2 aperture lens. You have Zeiss optics in there, optical image stabilization, a backside illuminated sensor, and both LED and xenon flashes. Something that we continue to be thankful for seeing with Samsung's devices, which isn't available with Nokia's line, is that the Galaxy S4 features a removable back cover, so you gain access to its battery, but even better is the fact that it also packs along a very useful micro SD card slot to increase its storage capacity. Ah yes, we've seen this comparison before, Windows Phone versus Android, and we're not going to go down into every single minute detail about the two, but we'll tell you what we like specifically on these two handsets. Now with the Lumia 1020 and Windows Phone, it still has that appeal with its start screen. You have all the dynamic live tiles here running, so it aggregates some very useful information. And on top of that, the platform utilizes that modern UI, which is very spiffy looking. However, it still pales into comparison with what TouchWiz has to offer with Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean. For starters, you get a significant amount of personalization with the platform, from its widgets down to the icons. There's a lot of control with that. On top of that, TouchWiz brings forth some very neat features that are really exclusive to it. For example, you could use the various air gestures to actually move between a web browser up and down. That's pretty useful. You have the eye tracking movement as well. And if you're in certain elements, like let's say the calendar, your text messages, or even if you go to the gallery, you could use its air view feature to actually hover your finger over certain things to get a preview. So it's stuff like that that really gives the platform a lot more depth over the Nokia Lumia 1020. This is a perfect example in how specs don't really dictate the performance on the device. It's arguable that the Galaxy S4 has the better hardware. It features a 1.9 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 processor with 2 GB of RAM versus the dual-core 1.5 GHz Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Plus processor with 2 GB of RAM on the Lumia 1020. Quite frankly, the performance are pretty identical on both. Very smooth and responsive, doing basic tasks. For example, just opening up applications. They pretty much handle in the same amount of finesse and ease. And even more intensive ones, whether it be gaming, anything video related, they're both able to exhibit the same level of performance. So not really a big difference, even though that the Lumia 1020 might be sporting hardware that's a little bit more dated. Despite having a size advantage with its larger 5-inch display, we don't find the Galaxy S4 to be any more advantageous when it comes to typing up messages, just because they both feature spacious layouts and super responsive rates to keep up with us. We just like that there's a dedicated row of numbers and some punctuations that are accessible from the main layout on the Galaxy S4. And alternatively, you also have that swipe method if you like. But the Windows Phone keyboard is still pretty nice just because it has also a killer autocorrect feature. It's actually a pleasure to surf the web on both devices just because they feature 4G LTE connectivity for fast page loads. Page rendering is instantaneous, and on top of that, you have very smooth navigational controls, but there's some added benefits with the Galaxy S4's experience. For starters, you could use those air gestures to actually scroll up and down between web pages and even switch between tabs by doing left and right movements. But on top of that, you have also that eye tracking movement, which is, might be gimmicky, but some people will find that useful. We absolutely like the music players on both. They have some level of appeal to make them stand out, but when it comes to audio quality, there's no question that the Lumia 1020's output is significantly stronger over the Samsung Galaxy S4. Both handsets are more than capable of playing high-definition videos, and you can tell very responsive, very sharp too, thanks to their AMOLED displays. But we're going to hand it to the Galaxy S4 just because when you're a little bit larger, it tends to be the more ideal thing. On top of that, there's some cool functionality available with it as well. For starters, you can use the air view gesture to actually preview the timeline. And on top of that, you have also pop-up play, which layers the video on top of whatever you're doing. So with that, you could have better multitasking. One would probably tend to think that the Lumia 1020 would blow the Galaxy S4 in terms of the functionality just because it's packing a beefy camera, but it's not quite the case, and we could tell here with the camera UI. They're very similar in terms of their offerings. You have a lot of different effects you could do. On top of that, some manual adjustments. So for example, with the Lumia 1020, it just has this nice dial going on where you could actually adjust certain elements like ISO, the shutter speed, the focus, and all that. With the Galaxy S4, you can still have those things, but it's a little bit more in that traditional menu style where you could go in and just change the settings itself. You have ISO, you could change the white balance, but on top of that, you have all the shooting modes available on the palm of your hand right here. You could switch between them. So from panoramic to HDR to drama shots, best face, you have that with it. With the Lumia 1020 though, in order to gain access to those shooting modes, you actually have to run a separate application. It is the Nokia Smart Cam, and from here you're going to have pretty much the same set of options. For example, you have the beauty shot, you have the best faces, and just a host of other things that really make both devices very compelling when it comes to shooting photos. On its own, the Samsung Galaxy S4's 13 megapixel autofocus camera takes some sharp looking photos, and we're not complaining. It's definitely above average over other things and continues to be the go-to device if you want to take photos. But the Lumia 1020 has really set the pace for everything else out there with its 41 megapixel autofocus camera, PureView camera. It just has an immense amount of detail and really wins in a lot of categories, from color reproduction, exposure, to low lighting performance. And the xenon flash on there too just makes it the ideal camera if you're really intent about taking the best photos out there. At the same time, we definitely like what the Lumia 1020 brings to the table with its 1080p video recording quality. The Galaxy S4 is still a great device for that, but there's just a lot more stuff going on with the Lumia 1020. You have a consistent exposure, you have phenomenal details, natural looking colors, and a good frame rate at 30 frames per second. And you also have a mode where you can do 24 frames per second for that cinematic look. And the other neat feature with the Lumia 1020 is you have lossless zoom, so you can zoom in on certain places without any degradation to its quality. It's honestly a toss-up when it comes to call quality. With the Lumia 1020, voices are clear and distinct on both ends of the line, but it's just the earpiece. It's very weak with its tone, so you actually have to mash it close to your ear just to comprehend stuff. On the other hand, with the Galaxy S4, the biggest thing about it is that voices have a little bit distortion going on with them. And then there's battery life. Between the two, we just noticed that the Galaxy S4 has a slight advantage, only by a small margin. It's not something big. We're able to get roughly through 18 hours of normal usage out of the Lumia 1020. In comparison, the Galaxy S4 will easily get you by through a solid day. We have two wonderful flagship smartphones right here. The Nokia Lumia 1020 can be purchased through AT&T with a 2-year contract price point of $300. Now, some people would argue that's an expensive cost, but when you factor in its 32 gigabytes of internal storage and that beefy 41 megapixel PureView camera in the rear, it kind of justifies why it's at that price range. On the other hand, the Samsung Galaxy S4 can be bought for less, $200 to 2-year contract, and it's available through all 4 major wireless carriers in the US. Now, the reason why you probably want to go with the Lumia 1020 is for taking photos and videos. It's not to say that the camera on the Galaxy S4 is bad. It actually takes some really great photos, but the Lumia 1020 just takes some better ones over its rival. But we'll give it to the Galaxy S4 in terms of the experience. Android and TouchWiz just has a lot deeper level than what Windows Phone 8 and the Lumia 1020 brings to the table. You get also, not only do you get the personalization, but you also get those other features, whether it be the air gestures, the universal remote functionality, TV out functionality, and all the other software enhancements. Really makes the experience on the Galaxy S4 far more compelling than the Nokia Lumia 1020. So if you'd like to learn more about either devices, guys, you could check out our website, PhoneArena.com. This is John V. Thanks for watching.